Jax's revenge domain.
I held my hand out to greet the new CEO, and that simple gesture cost a company $1.8 billion. My name is Garrett Hudson. I'm 47, and until 3 weeks ago, I was managing partner at Summit Ridge Capital here in Phoenix. If you've never heard of us, that's by design. We don't advertise on billboards or sponsor golf tournaments. We move quietly, write big checks, and expect 2 things in return: smart management and basic human decency. The chairman of Phoenix Industrial Holdings had a different idea about decency. Before I explain how one handshake destroyed an entire board of directors, let me back up and tell you how I got to that room in the first place. Summit Ridge wasn't always a powerhouse. 15 years ago, I was just another guy in corporate treasury, working 60-hour weeks and watching executives make decisions that would give me nightmares. I spent 10 years at Consolidated Manufacturing, a mid-tier industrial group that made everything from aircraft components to construction equipment. My job was simple on paper and miserable in practice. Keep us funded, keep us compliant, keep the rating agencies from turning us into a case study of what not to do. I saw up close what happens when capital is treated like an entitlement instead of a responsibility. I watched bankers smile to your face and quietly shift your risk rating 2 notches down because your CEO couldn't stop running his mouth on earnings calls. I saw deals fall apart because someone in a position of power decided humility was beneath them. I lost count of how many strategic refinancings were really just emergency life support for companies bleeding cash because their leadership thought respect was optional. My dad taught me something that stuck with me long after he was gone. He worked construction his whole life, built half the subdivisions in North Phoenix back when this place was still desert and dreams. Son, he used to say, money doesn't change people. It just shows you who they really were all along. After one too many late nights explaining to nervous bankers why our latest acquisition made sense when it clearly didn't, I walked away from Consolidated. I took what I knew about capital structures, risk covenants, and how executives think or don't think minors under pressure, and started Summit Ridge in a 2-room office above a tax preparation service on Camelback Road. The pitch was straightforward. We write big checks. We stay out of your day-to-day operations, but the cost of that freedom is very specific behavior when it matters. Don't be stupid with other people's money. Don't be cruel with the people who keep your company alive. Don't treat accountability like an optional feature. Our first fund came from a handful of institutional backers who were tired of seeing their investments wrecked by management teams whose egos outpaced their ethics. We were small then, just me, an analyst fresh out of ASU, and a shared secretary who also worked for the insurance agency downstairs. But we had something most firms didn't: a clear line in the sand about what we would and wouldn't tolerate. The early deals were modest. A $50 million injection here, a $75 million bridge facility there. Nothing that would make headlines, but enough to build a reputation. We had one rule that made lawyers nervous. Every commitment included what we called a conduct integrity provision. Simple language that said if senior leadership engaged in documented behavior that materially harmed the company's reputation during our negotiations, we could withdraw our capital immediately. No penalties, no delays, no renegotiation rights, just gone. Most clients skimmed past it. Their lawyers called it boilerplate. But I'd learned the hard way that character matters more than spreadsheets. 3 years ago, we nearly got burned on a deal with Mesa Steel, a regional manufacturer that needed $400 million to modernize their facilities. Their CEO seemed solid, former military straight shooter, good references. We did our diligence, ran the numbers, everything looked clean. 2 days before closing, a video surfaced from an employee town hall. The CEO drunk on what he thought was off-the-record candor, telling a room full of workers that anyone who couldn't keep up with the new productivity targets could find work somewhere that coddles mediocrity. The clip went viral in manufacturing circles. Within a week, it was in every union negotiation, every regulatory filing, every journalist's back pocket. We still closed that deal. I let my partner at the time talk me into it. It's just optics, he said. The fundamentals are sound. He was wrong. Within 6 months, Mesa Steel was dealing with work slowdowns, regulatory scrutiny, and a customer base that suddenly had questions about their corporate culture. We got our money back eventually, but the headache wasn't worth the return. That's when I promised myself it wouldn't happen again. If I was going to put hundreds of millions behind a company, I needed more than clean financials. I needed to see how the people in charge behaved when they thought nobody important was watching. Phoenix Industrial Holdings entered our orbit during what their board called a strategic transformation phase. That's corporate speak for we're broke and need help fast. They weren't a bad company, just a poorly managed one. Defense manufacturing, infrastructure projects, solid contracts with the Pentagon and state governments. But their previous CEO had spent 5 years making acquisitions like he was collecting vintage cars, expensive, flashy, and completely unnecessary. The debt load was crushing them. They'd leveraged everything twice over to buy companies that didn't fit their core business. A software firm in Austin that developed logistics apps, a small aerospace manufacturer in Tucson that made specialized components for satellites, a construction company in Flagstaff that specialized in government buildings. None of it made strategic sense, but it looked impressive in investor presentations. By the time they reached out to Summit Ridge, Phoenix Industrial was burning through $30 million a quarter just servicing debt. Their credit lines were tapped out. Vendors were demanding cash on delivery. The Pentagon was making noises about reviewing their contractor status because of financial stability concerns. They needed $8 billion, and they needed it fast. The numbers weren't terrible once you looked past the acquisition spree. Their core defense manufacturing business was profitable. They had long-term contracts with reliable payment terms. The problem was leadership, specifically Wesley Crane, the board chairman who'd rubber-stamped every deal that got them into this mess. Wesley came from old Phoenix money. His grandfather had started a mining operation in the 1920s that eventually became a small fortune in copper and real estate. Wesley inherited the chairmanship of Phoenix Industrial when his father died, along with enough stock to control board decisions. He'd never worked a day in manufacturing, never had to make payroll, never had to explain to a room full of investors why your latest strategy wasn't working, but he liked the title, liked being introduced as chairman of one of Arizona's largest defense contractors, liked speaking at Chamber of Commerce dinners about the importance of American manufacturing. What he didn't like was admitting when he was wrong. The first time I met Wesley was during our initial due diligence session, 6 months before the board meeting that would change everything. He walked into our conference room like he was doing us a favor. Expensive suit, expensive watch, the kind of handshake that lasted exactly 2 seconds longer than necessary, not because he was being friendly, but because he wanted to make sure you noticed the Rolex. "Gentlemen," he said, "though I was the only person in the room, I appreciate Summit Ridge's interest in our opportunity. Our opportunity. Like they were offering us a chance to buy stock in Apple circa 1985. I spent 20 minutes walking him through our investment criteria, our governance requirements, our expectations for transparency and accountability. He nodded at all the right moments, asked a few questions about timeline and structure, seemed engaged. But I caught him checking his phone twice during our conversation. And when I mentioned the conduct integrity provision, he waved it off without reading it. "Standard language," he said. "Our legal team will handle the details. That should have been my second warning." We spent the next 4 months in detailed diligence. Phoenix Industrial's books were a mess, but not in a criminal way, just in the way that happens when nobody's been paying attention to the fundamentals. Too much debt, too many overhead costs, too many executives who'd been hired because they knew someone rather than because they could do the job. But the core business was solid. Their manufacturing facilities in Mesa and Chandler were well run. Their contracts with the Defense Department were secure. Their workforce knew what they were doing. With proper capital structure and competent leadership, Phoenix Industrial could be profitable again. The catch was Wesley. Every conversation we had reinforced my impression that he saw this deal as a personal favor we were doing for him, not a business transaction between equals. When we asked about board changes, he got defensive. When we suggested bringing in outside management consultants, he insisted their current team could handle it. When we pushed for monthly reporting requirements, he complained about micromanagement. My partner Bryce started calling him the inheritance after our third meeting. "Guy's never earned anything in his life," Bryce said. "Doesn't understand why anyone would question his judgment." But the deal made sense despite Wesley, not because of him. Phoenix Industrial's problems were fixable with enough capital and the right oversight. We structured the commitment as $1.8 billion in staged tranches, tied to specific operational milestones and governance reforms. The board would add 2 independent directors with experience in defense manufacturing. They'd hire a new CEO with a track record of turning around leveraged companies. And Wesley would step back from day-to-day operations, remaining as chairman, but with limited authority. The conduct integrity provision was non-negotiable. After Mesa Steel, I insisted on language that gave us clean exit rights if leadership behavior created reputational risk during negotiations. Wesley's lawyers tried to soften it twice. Both times I told them to put it back the way we wrote it or find another investor. The final language was crystal clear. Documented conduct by senior leadership that materially harms the reputational standing of the company or its incoming leadership during negotiations allows for immediate withdrawal of capital commitment without penalty or delay. Wesley signed it without reading it. I know because I was watching his eyes when he flipped to that page. He spent maybe 10 seconds scanning 3 paragraphs of text that would ultimately cost him his career. But that was Wesley's style. He was used to signing things other people had already decided, used to having problems solved by lawyers and accountants and consultants while he focused on the important work of being important. The new CEO they selected was Quentin Mills, a 38-year-old turnaround specialist who'd successfully restructured 2 defense contractors in the previous decade. Good track record, good references, good instincts for operational efficiency. During our background calls, 3 different people described him as smart and practical, which in my experience usually means someone who can tell the difference between what sounds good in a boardroom and what actually works in the real world. The transition announcement was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in December. Full board meeting, live webcast for employees and investors, carefully choreographed to project confidence and stability. That Tuesday morning, I flew into Sky Harbor at 6:30 a.m. and took a car straight to Phoenix Industrial's headquarters downtown. December in Phoenix is perfect weather, clear skies, 72 degrees, the kind of morning that makes you understand why people move here from places where winter means something. The city was just waking up as we drove through downtown, early commuters heading to glass towers that reflected the desert sunrise. Phoenix Industrial's building was exactly what you'd expect from a defense contractor trying to project stability and success. 30-story glass and steel tower, marble lobby with company logos etched in bronze, security desk that looked like it belonged in a government facility. The lobby had all the standard corporate theater, stock ticker on one wall showing real-time prices, promotional video on another wall showing smiling workers in hard hats and lab coats, carefully staged shots of manufacturing floors and testing facilities. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 40s who'd clearly been briefed on VIP treatment, gave me the full professional smile. "Welcome to Phoenix Industrial, Mr. Hudson. Someone from Investor Relations will be down to escort you." The escort turned out to be Troy Nash, a nervous young guy in an expensive suit that didn't quite fit right. He couldn't have been more than 25, probably hired straight out of some MBA program to handle the interface between Phoenix Industrial and the financial community. As we rode the elevator to the executive floor, he made small talk about my flight and the weather, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. "Big day today," I said, testing the waters. "Definitely," he replied. "A little too quickly. Lot of moving pieces, but everything's coming together." "What's the mood upstairs?" He hesitated for just a second. "Optimistic?" "Maybe a little nervous, but that's normal for something this size." The executive floor had that hushed, expensive feel that comes from thick carpet and serious money. Framed photos lined the hallways, past CEOs shaking hands with governors and senators, ribbon-cutting ceremonies at new facilities, awards from industry associations and military procurement offices. The kind of corporate history that's meant to reassure investors that this is a company with deep roots and important relationships. Troy led me past several smaller conference rooms to the main boardroom at the end of the hall. Double glass doors, cameras already mounted and ready, red lights blinking to indicate they were live. Through the glass, I could see the room was set up for maximum impact. Long polished table that probably cost more than most people's cars. High-backed leather chairs that screamed executive authority, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of downtown Phoenix and the mountains beyond. "They asked me to bring these in when you arrived," Troy said, handing me a carefully arranged bouquet of white lilies and eucalyptus for the announcement, optics. I took the flowers, noting the irony. Phoenix Industrial had specifically requested that Summit Ridge sponsor the refreshment and decor for the announcement as a gesture of partnership. Now they wanted me to carry them in like I was part of the catering staff. "Anything else?" I asked. "Just, they're expecting you to take the seat at the far end." No nameplate, but that's normal for these kinds of sessions. Inside the boardroom, the key players were already assembled, and clearly in their element. Wesley Crane held court at the head of the table, every inch the powerful chairman in his charcoal suit and burgundy tie. Early 60s, silver hair perfectly styled, the kind of presence that commanded attention without requiring effort. He was in conversation with two board members using the low, confident tone that successful executives develop when they're used to having people hang on their words. Quinton Mills, the incoming CEO, sat about halfway down the table on the right side, flipping through a printed presentation deck. He looked younger than his 38 years, which probably helped explain why Wesley felt comfortable treating him like a junior employee rather than the person who would soon be running the company. Quinton had the intense, slightly tired look of someone who'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, rehearsing talking points and anticipating questions from analysts and investors. Ross Palmer, the CFO, was deep in his own materials at the opposite end from Wesley. Ross was the kind of finance guy who actually understood the numbers rather than just presenting them, mid-50s, methodical, the type who'd probably been running scenarios in his head for months about how this deal would impact every aspect of the company's operations. His folder was thick with backup documentation, the kind of detail work that doesn't make it into presentations but matters when things go wrong. The communications team was setting up in the back of the room, adjusting camera angles and testing audio levels. 3 different cameras to capture every angle, -1, focused on Wesley for his opening remarks, 1 on Quinton for his CEO introduction, 1 wide shot for the Q&A session with analysts. This wasn't just an internal announcement. It was a carefully choreographed production designed to project confidence and competence to the broader investment community. When I walked in carrying the flowers, Wesley glanced up and gave me the kind of acknowledgement you might give to a catering manager who'd arrived on time. Not rude exactly, but clearly categorizing me as support staff rather than a participant. He was already turning back to his conversation before I'd fully entered the room. Perfect timing, he said to the room in general, not to me specifically. Set those on the credenza and we'll get started. I walked around the table toward Quinton instead. He looked up as I approached, and for a moment our eyes met. I could see he was nervous about more than just his presentation. There was something in his expression that suggested he understood the stakes better than his chairman did. The flowers felt heavier in my left arm as I shifted them and extended my right hand toward Quinton. This was supposed to be a simple gesture of welcome and support. Instead, it became the moment that changed everything. "Welcome to Phoenix Industrial," I said clearly. "I'm Garrett." That's when Wesley turned our way, saw my outstretched hand, and decided to show everyone in the room exactly who he thought belonged at his table. "I don't shake hands with low-level employees," Wesley announced loud enough for every microphone in the room to catch every syllable. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The reaction was immediate, and telling a board member to Wesley's right gave a quick snicker. Someone halfway down the table made that nervous laugh people do when they know something's wrong but don't want to be the first to call it out. One of the communications staff in the back barely managed to hide his grin behind a folder, as if that would somehow erase the expression from the cameras trained directly on us. Quinton looked at my extended hand, then at Wesley, then down at his presentation materials like they contained escape instructions. He didn't move to shake my hand, didn't correct the chairman, didn't say a word, just stared at his agenda and waited for the moment to pass. I didn't drop my hand immediately. For maybe 3 seconds, I kept it extended while Wesley's smile faltered just slightly. He seemed genuinely annoyed that I hadn't immediately apologized and shuffled away like good help should. His eyes flicked from my hand to my face, as if checking whether I was too dense to understand the hierarchy he just announced to the entire world. "I'm here as instructed," I said, keeping my voice level enough for the nearest microphones to pick up every word clearly. "Then stand where you're told," he replied without missing a beat. "This meeting is for executives." Someone near the end of the table muttered awkward, just loud enough for his neighbor to hear and for the audio equipment to catch. The laughter in the room grew thinner, stretched over the silence that followed. I lowered my hand on my own terms, not his, and placed the flowers on the table at the edge of his sightline. Then I walked to the empty chair at the far end of the boardroom table and sat down. No nameplate, no welcome packet, no acknowledgement that I belonged there. That was fine. They'd written me out of their script. They were about to learn what that decision cost. "Let's begin," Wesley said, already turning toward the main screen at the front of the room. The first slide appeared, Phoenix Industrial Holdings logo and the date, followed by leadership transition and capital structure update. Wesley launched into his opening remarks with the practiced confidence of someone who'd never had his authority questioned. He talked about strategic partnerships and aligned leadership and long-term shareholder value. Big words that sounded impressive, but said very little about the actual work of running a company. I listened to the rhythm of his voice, watched how the others around the table reacted to him, noticed the small tells that emerge when people think they're among friends, the slight smirks when he made a joke at someone else's expense, the way certain board members nodded along before he'd finished his sentences. The atmosphere of a room where one person's opinion mattered more than everyone else's combined. As the second slide came up, transaction overview, I decided it was time to clarify a few things. Before you go further, I said, cutting through his presentation momentum, there's something you should know. Wesley turned slowly like I'd just interrupted a church service. We're not taking input from support staff during this session, he said, letting condescension drip through every word. You can give your notes to investor relations afterward. I met his stare directly. If you're refusing to shake my hand, then by tomorrow morning, $1.8 billion will no longer be part of this deal. The silence that followed wasn't movie silence, it was real silence, the kind where you can hear the building's ventilation system and someone's phone vibrating against the table. No one moved, no one spoke, the only sound was the faint hum of the cameras continuing to record. Then someone laughed, too loud and too forced, like they were trying to break a spell. All right, a board member said quickly. Let's keep this professional. Wesley's smile returned, but thinner now. Sit down and save the theater, he told me. Capital funding is being handled at the appropriate level. I am the appropriate level, I replied. That got their attention. Ross Palmer, the CFO, looked up from his materials with the expression of someone who just realized he might have been making incorrect assumptions about the power dynamics in the room. Before we continue, Ross said carefully, we should confirm final authorization from the funding source. Legal said, we need direct sign-off from the capital controller. That's being handled. Wesley snapped, clearly annoyed by the interruption. From the capital controller specifically, Ross corrected, glancing meaningfully in my direction. All eyes turned toward me. I checked my watch, a small gesture, but it felt like adjusting a pressure valve. That would be me. Wesley stared, really looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the room, not at the flowers I'd been carrying, not at the seat I'd been assigned, but at my face. You're saying you control the funding. I'm saying I'm the managing partner at Summit Ridge Capital, authorized to deploy or withdraw the entire commitment. A director farther down the table leaned forward. How much authority are we talking about exactly? All of it, I said. Summit Ridge provides the primary tranche. Without us, the remaining commitments can't proceed as structured. Ross nodded once, confirming what his spreadsheets had been telling him all along. The room shifted chairs, adjusting, papers rustling, people suddenly very interested in their phones. That's when Ross brought up the clause. He flipped through his folder and tapped a specific page. There is one provision we need to acknowledge, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Wesley didn't look at him. We've covered everything. We've been over this for months. The conduct provision, Ross said more firmly. You could feel the energy in the room change. Directors started flipping through pages, looking for language they'd probably skimmed past during the initial reviews months earlier. What exactly does it say? Quentin asked, finally participating in the conversation that would determine his future. Ross read directly from the document. Documented conduct by senior leadership that materially harms the reputational standing of the company or its incoming leadership during negotiations allows for immediate capital withdrawal. Another board member looked up from his copy. It doesn't require intent or prior warning, just documented impact. Wesley waved dismissively. Standard boilerplate language. We put clauses like that in everything. It was specifically revised, Ross said quietly. Summit Ridge requested that exact wording. Every head in the room turned toward me. I was concerned about behavior, I said simply. Wesley scoffed. This is becoming a distraction. Nobody here has misbehaved. A director glanced up at the camera mounted in the corner of the room. This entire meeting is being recorded. For transparency, Wesley said sharply, as if transparency was something he personally had invented. Yes, I agreed. For transparency. During the 10-minute break that followed, I stepped into a quiet alcove near the elevators and made one phone call. My partner Bryce picked up on the second ring. Yeah, execute the withdrawal, I said. Full amount. Effective immediately. There was a pause long enough for him to understand what I was telling him. All $1.8 billion. All of it. Conduct provision. Documentation available, understood. Will execute now. When I returned to the boardroom, they were trying to pretend nothing had changed. Wesley was back at the presentation, talking about liquidity runways and growth projections, all built on an assumption that was already gone. The red lights on the cameras continued blinking. The webcast continued streaming. And phones around the table started buzzing with the kind of urgent notifications that change everything. Ross Palmer's phone buzzed first, then another, like a wave rolling across the room. Ross went pale as he read his screen. "The primary commitment," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "has been withdrawn." "What does that mean?" a director asked. "Executed, confirmed, full amount." Wesley shot to his feet. "That's not possible. We have agreements. We have signatures." "The clause allows it," I said calmly. "You created the conditions on camera." "This is unacceptable," he said, scanning the room for allies. "You will reverse this immediately." "There's nothing to reverse. It's done." What happened next wasn't dramatic. Real boardrooms don't stage coups like in movies. They follow procedure. They reference bylaws. They make motions and take votes. But underneath the formal language, something simpler was happening: self-preservation. Within 2 hours, Wesley Crane was placed on administrative leave as chairman. Quinton Mills's appointment was suspended pending review. A crisis management committee was formed to explore damage control options. The business press had the story by afternoon. Defense contractor loses $1.8 billion commitment after governance incident. The stock dropped 23% in after-hours trading. Industry analysts spent the evening debating whether investor accountability had gone too far. Back at Summit Ridge, we did what we always do after a big decision. We debriefed. What did we learn? That conduct clauses work, but only if you're willing to enforce them. That respect isn't a courtesy you extend after closing a deal. It's the cost of entry to the conversation. A week later, a journalist called for a comment. "People want to understand why you walked away," she said. "They saw it happen," I replied. "It was recorded." What's the lesson for other executives? Respect isn't something you show after a deal is signed. It's what gets you to the signing table in the first place. If you can't manage basic courtesy when cameras are rolling, you won't have the chance to prove you can do it when they're not. People assume power announces itself with corner offices and reserved parking. That day, it walked into a boardroom, carrying flowers and no nameplate. Wesley saw what he wanted to see: someone to dismiss, someone beneath notice. He learned, in the most expensive way possible, that the quiet person at the end of the table sometimes holds all the cards. I held out my hand to welcome a new CEO. The chairman decided that was beneath him. He thought humiliation was free. It cost him $1.8 billion and his career. Sometimes the handshake you refuse is the one that matters most. In business, the moment someone decides you're not worth their respect is the exact moment they've shown you they're not worth your investment. Power isn't about the title on your business card or the chair you sit in. It's about understanding that every interaction is being recorded by someone, and the cost of arrogance always comes due.